endorsement of some of the Tea Parties around the state. And so, but the people that I ran into at the Tea Party, they were people like us, grandmas and grandpas, young folks, old folks, just normal, everyday, off-the-shelf individuals, people that are living life and all of a sudden realize that our country is being stripped away from us, taken away from us, and the people have now awakened to that fact. That is the Tea Party in a nutshell.
Hey, Randy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The obvious next question in all of this is going to be how and why this happened, and then obviously how are we going to prevent this from happening again? From your perspective, give us some concrete ideas on how you, as a constitutionalist, would fix this remedy. And let me preface by saying I believe that tragedies always breed another tragedy, and that we always lose something or lose some type of freedom out of it. So my question is, how can you apply the Constitution and freedom and liberty into making sure something like this, or make it a safer world in which something like this is more difficult to happen?
Well, what you're getting ready to hear, my answer, you won't hear very often from other folks.
That's why I asked you.
Especially the media type. Now, let me tell you where I believe it all begins. It doesn't even begin with the Constitution, James. It begins in our heart. Now, as a politician, I understand that my job was to affect policy through legislation. But as a Christian, I understand that my job and my responsibility is to affect people's lives by sharing the truth of the birth, the death, and the resurrection of Christ. And only when a heart is changed can a mind be changed. And so it starts with that. But let me see if I can give you a very brief synopsis of how to apply this to with the Constitution. Our Constitution provides for one very basic thing, and that is our liberty, that is our freedom, and that is the hallmark of America. And without freedom, without liberty, we would cease to function as Americans. So if we're going to apply this freedom, we have to expand freedom. Now, this may sound a little harsh, but I wish that there had been more people in that audience that had a concealed carry or an open carry. I believe, matter of fact, Arizona is an open carry, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, they are.
So, wouldn't it have been great if there had been more people there at that rally that day that had their firearms with them? Then the other 19 people probably never would have got shot.
And I think somebody did tackle him from the audience.
And that is the part of the story that's not being told, is that in the end, citizens came and tackled him in order to stop him. But the ultimate question is, how many lives could have been saved if everyone was armed in that incident? And that's what I like to always point out is, constitutionally, it is safer to have a citizenry that is armed, but unfortunately, we have been lulled to sleep again in thinking that it's best that we're not armed, and I think that's the direction that our government's going to end up going in this whole idea. Well,
that argument is out there, is that there needs to be more gun control or whatever. A lot of things were misconstrued or misportrayed when the story started coming out. The number one thing is, in addition to the errors about who the shooter is, was also about who the congresswoman is. The people in the state of Arizona know that this is a liberal person who votes just in line with President Obama. Right. And in line with him, she is pro-abortion, pro-choice, pro-abortion. She voted for the bailout. She voted for the health care bill. She is much like John McCain, and my husband has a friend in Arizona who actually lives in this county, and he says he's checked with everybody. Nobody knows who voted for her. They were actually voting for the other person. So, and there was a controversy about how she got elected and about the vote count. There was a delay in actually getting the count. And it's not to say that she was corrupt or that she isn't a nice person as an individual, but she is not what even Fox News was calling her a centrist. Well, no, she's a left-leaning Democrat who used to be a Republican. The county she lives in order to get elected, you have to be a Democrat. She switched parties for whatever purpose, but she is in line with the Democrat Party. And yet, she's being portrayed as it. Now, nobody wanted a 40-year-old woman to get shot in the head. Nobody is advocating that. But why not just tell the truth about what her politics are?
Right.
And yet, it's not.
Yeah.
And the same thing with who the shooter is. And what will end up being is that even the sheriff was advocating, it was beginning to lay the groundwork for controlling free speech in the media,
right.
the radio. So this is how you have to always be careful. As a pastor was saying today, you have to use discernment, compare it to what the truth is. And I see too many of these Fox News Republicans out there that just that's what they believe is gospel, rather than what the Bible says.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to what James said a while ago, that usually when you have a tragedy like this, government is going to step in and try and prevent another tragedy. Well, that's not going to happen. As a matter of fact, the best way to prevent these kinds of tragedies, I believe, is to have the citizens awakened and armed to be able to take care of themselves. And these kind of things would, I think, be mitigated, certainly.
Some of the most polite people you'd ever want to meet are at the gun clubs, and everybody's carrying a firearm of some sort, or at the shooting range. And I remember going shooting with my dad once. He was teaching me how, when I quite didn't understand my dad. It's like, Dad, why do you like all these guns? So he took me out to the shooting range, and we were leaving, and he said, now everybody out here is real polite. And I said, well, Dad, they all have a gun.
That's right.
And that's why they're polite. But it's true.
Yeah.
You're going to walk carefully. And it would be better if the people whose hearts are pure are the ones carrying the gun. Scripture says, thou shalt not murder. It doesn't mean that you cannot defend yourself.
Exactly.
And we have to be careful of those. Well, we've only got a couple of minutes to the end of the first half of America in the Balance on Truth in Focus Internet Radio. And we're going to get to the part. Now, you were a legislator for how long? 8 years.
8 years.
In the Oklahoma Senate.
Right.
And our Senate going into, our legislature going into 2011 is broke. The whole state is broke. The budget is in circumstances. So real briefly, before we get to the bottom of the hour, we can pick it up after the second half. But how do you think they're going to handle the budget shortfall? Well,
we only have one choice this year, and that is to cut the budget. And the last two sessions, we have been broke. We have overspent. And the way that the leaders in the House and the Senate, the way that they took care of that situation was to borrow money, to create bond indebtedness, to take money from the stimulus package, and basically to kick that proverbial financial can down the path a little bit further and let someone else take care of the problems. Well, the problems now have come to just staring us right in the face. We no longer have stimulus money, thank goodness. Unfortunately, the politicians over the last 2 years spent down our $800 million rainy day fund. So now we have zero in the emergency savings account, the rainy day fund.
How did they spend that down?
They spent it by on just government. I mean, just growing government. All the policies that were in place before, when we had a budget shortfall, rather than cutting the budget, they took money out of the savings account to continue to pay those budgeted items, whether they're a priority or not.
The Constitution says that they can do that.
Oh, yeah, it says they can do it.
Doesn't it need a certain number of votes, like 2/3?
Well, not if the governor declares an emergency. So here's the emergency. The politicians overspend, and all of a sudden that becomes an emergency. That's not what our rainy day fund was ever envisioned for.
I don't think that's what the public thinks it was for.
No, that's exactly right.
All right, we got a couple of minutes left. Where do you think? How do you think they're going to handle this?
Well, they're going to have to do something that may be an extraordinary measure in the legislature. They're going to have to actually prioritize the spending. That's what you and I would do with our family budget. We sit down and we prioritize, and we see how much money we have to spend at the end of the month, and we know that we need to make our house payment. We got to buy food for the kids and clothes and that sort of thing. And you actually spend your money on the priorities first. Then if you have any money left over, maybe you'll think about buying a boat or a new car or something like that. Well, most politicians have that upside down. They spend the money on whatever they want to spend money on to help them maybe get reelected. help them to gain favor with other bureaucrats or politicians, and maybe even some of their constituents. But this year, Amanda, they're truly going to have to think really what are the priorities in our state spending, and have to start there.
Do you think they know what the priorities are?
No, not yet. I mean, but they will before the end of the session's over, because they're going to have to cut somewhere between right around $300 million, and that has really dropped over the last couple of months. When I left session last year, we were $1 billion in the rears. But now the economy is starting to turn just a little bit, so it's not quite as bad. So we're right about $300 million short.
$300 million short, and
Yeah.
it's going to have to be found someplace.
Yeah.
That's the music for the first half of America in the Balance on Truth and Focus Internet Radio. We're going to ask you to stick around through the bottom of the hour, and we'll come back. Our special guest in studio is former Senator Randy Brogdon from the great city of Owasso. And welcome back to the second half of America in the Balance on Truth in Focus Radio, Internet Radio. This is Amanda Teagarden in studio with James Parsons. We're both of OK Safe. And James, you are with OK Safe, aren't you?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, thank the Lord, because I just said so. I'd like to invite you to our website, which is ok-safe.com. That's ok-safe.com. SAFE stands for Sovereignty and Free Enterprise, and that's what we're advocating for. OK Safe is an issue advocacy group. We educate, advocate, and we lobby the Oklahoma legislature. We have some upcoming educational opportunities for people who live in the Tulsa and Oklahoma City areas of Oklahoma. On January 15th, 2011, from 9 until 12:30, we will have a citizen involvement in the legislative process training session. This is free and open to the public. It's from 9 till 12:30 at the Village Library, which is in the north part of Oklahoma City. And you can do a search on the Village Library so you can get the address. It's on North Pennsylvania Avenue. Please bring your writing material or your laptop, because it's a working citizen involvement training session. And everybody should know who their elected officials are at the state level. You have more power and authority and responsibility at the state, and you can find where your legislator actually lives and works much easier than you can by going to Washington, D.C. That's on a Saturday, January 15th. And on Saturday, January 22nd, in Tulsa, or Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, from 9 until 12:30 at the HQ building at 10. The address is on our website for both these locations. Again, from 9 until 12:30, educational opportunity. 9 to 12:30, bring a cup of coffee and your computer. We're going to again teach those in the northeast part of Oklahoma citizen involvement in the legislative process. Open to the public. If you go to our website on the front page, there are more details there at ok-safe.com. Senator Brogdon, how important is it that, or it's Randy.
Yeah, you call me Randy now.
Call you Randy now. All right. How important is it for folks to be involved in the legislative process?
Well, it's extremely important. You know, I have found that at the state capitol, the politicians are human, and they'll tend to try and get away with what they think they can get away with. But when the citizens are involved in the legislative process and helping the politician make the right decision, we're all better off. And I can tell you, I feel very comfortable when the Tea Party people come to this and roam the halls of the state capitol, when the 9/12 groups come and roam the halls of the state capitol. I'm out there walking the halls with them. I feel very comfortable. Not all the elected officials are they don't necessarily embrace them because sometimes it shines the light on what they're doing, and what they're doing is not always the right thing. So involvement is extremely critical for the legislative process.
And that involves an educated electorate.
You bet.
We need to, and that's what OK Safe is trying to do, is educate the citizens
right.
In the actual process, how a bill becomes law, understanding. It is amazing when you go to these organizations or go to a group meeting or even your Sunday school class or wherever it is, and you start talking, everybody knows who their U.S. officials are. The Congress in Washington, D.C., a lot of attention is directed there, but hardly anybody present company excluded, knows who their representative right here in Oklahoma is. You have a representative that serves a 2-year term. You've been voting for them, hopefully, every 2 years. They need to know who you are.
Sure.
And you need to know who they are. You need to invite them out for a cup of coffee. They are, just like you said, they're regular people. And until they know that the citizens are looking at what they're doing and following the vote,